This is actually the way I started. I suppose you could call it my professional career in ceramics, with a method of firing known as raku. It's an ancient, well, it's a 500-year-old Japanese method of firing, combining not only fire but fire and the oxygen-reducing qualities of smoke to react with the metals in the glaze, creating the colors and patterns on the surface. You want to pay particular attention to one line. That line, that's the silhouette, and that is what everything is about in symmetrical forms.
Yeah, when I did a residency over in a place called Seto, Japan, and I worked with in a studio with a Japanese potter that used essentially the same technique, and it was intriguing to me how different his palette was than the one I use. I use a wide variety of color, and my preference is color that is pretty intense, so that I like the blues to be blue and greens to be green and lavender to be lavender, stuff like that. His color palette was shockingly monochromatic, and I say shockingly not as a pejorative, but it was just amazingly monochromatic. And it was all, he did have some variety of colors, but it was all variation on brown.
I started examining the parts of the vessel, and I guess I felt the need to exaggerate those parts. And I think this body work kind of come to a point over about 4 or 5 years where all the parts of the pot were become very, exaggerated. Where, for example, the 3 parts of a pot are the foot, the body, and then the lip. And I've basically kind of in a weird way broken the rules of what those things mean as far as the aesthetic of the piece.
I take a lot more trouble centering this clay than anything else, because that's the part that's done. And once I have it, I start opening the clay up. And then close the baby in.
You see the shape of her fist on the outside of the piece. Here it comes. There, you can see her fist on the outside of the piece. And we're making a very fine pull now. We're not pressing very hard at all. And you can see those wonderfully beautiful throwing marks, those rings on the outside of the piece. That's a sign that a piece has been thrown on the wheel.
I can see the cones back in there on the shelf, and as they start to droop down, we can start to judge how much longer we're going to have to do, what part of the kiln is hotter or cooler, how we might have to adjust the flue or adjust the primary or secondary air to get that to even out. And at the same time we're doing that, we want to keep just a general stoking going to keep soaking the temperature. Lots of times, if we have a really fast firing that we get up to temperature pretty quick, what we'll do is continue to stoke for another couple hours to kind of hold it at that temperature to really get a good soak of that heat in, and we'll get much richer glaze surfaces. It's part of the I call it kind of high temperature raku sometimes. It's you have a certain amount of control over what happens, but what you're trying to do is, especially in the wood process, is allow the whole process of the flame, the path of the flame, the dance of the fire, the patterning through the kiln. You want that to be a part of the whole thing.
Of course, here we have a fire-breathing woman and an animal and a beach ball. And at the time, they made wonderful sense. And even if they don't now, maybe that's part of the mystery, because I really couldn't tell you exactly what I was thinking about when I made it. And often, after a piece is completed, what I was thinking is no longer essential at all to viewing the piece. It takes on its own life. And knowing exactly what the artist was thinking when... I think that's true of any artist, actually. I don't think it's important to know exactly what they were thinking when something was made. the piece becomes something quite valid, separate from the artist when it's done.
The funny thing is, a lot of this really is about improvisation and technique and loss of control.
You know, what I'm doing with my hand or my body in some way will be reflected in the paint itself.
But we have Babylonia and Egypt and Rome and Greece. And a lot of what I will be doing will be based on some of these cultures as well. Only difference is that mine will be based on law.
I'm just using religion, religious icons, as a vehicle to talk about contemporary issues that's happening today and what most people may be knowledgeable in.
Now, on the other hand, I've also included a window, because for me, a window, it's more than just a rectangular structure, you know, just somehow, you know, well, opens up a little bit more of the interior. For me, windows are things that are there being created by men, and then they have a lot of history in them. They can really show the whole world, they can tell us a little bit more about, you know, what they have seen. So they bear witness to, I guess, the human condition.
Hands, really hard to do. And in this case, I've kind of left them because I didn't know if I really needed to focus in on those. I'm still not sure. It feels like that's finished, and this line here for his arm just feels like it comes. It's just natural. It's there. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm not going to bring it out. This is his second arm.
I always feel that carving is one of the oldest arts in the world, because if you think about when we were hunter-gatherers and when hunters were going through the woods, they would blaze trees to mark their trail. And if 3 hunters blazed a tree, at the same tree, then the next person coming along would say, well, that's a face, 2 eyes, a mouth. And they would start carving. So I'm sure that wood carving has been with us just about as long as we've been able to mark wood at all with any kind of tool. So what you need to carve wood is anything that's harder than the wood that has an edge. So you can do it with flint. In Africa, they carve ebony with pieces of glass. You just need something that's hard and sharp.
It's easy. I mean, this is just almost effortless. And it's, like I said, 120 years old. I kind of think that's sort of cool in a way.
Very careful, you have to be which direction you are hitting it, because you could hit and the piece is gone. When
goes about 20,000 RPMs, and this is going to put the finish, which is, you know, really the artistic part of all of this. And we're going to take on, in this case, all the contours and the lines of the piece, so it'll all come together. This is actually cutting right into the metal, making it permanent.
Now, we'll see. Yeah, looks like the bowl cast. But the other stuff that I had in there didn't. And the bowl didn't cast well. We're going to have to make art out of that bowl.